Dame Kate Isabel Campbell of Melbourne was an acclaimed, gifted and determined paediatrician in an environment generally not supportive for women. Among many achievements, she proved a link between blindness in premature babies and oxygen levels in humidicribs. She won many significant awards. Australian engineer Franklin George Barnes was in England when this magnetic mine washed ashore in the Thames estuary on November 22, 1939. A few days later, without seeing the mine, he patented a solution that meant a ship could safely prematurely explode the mine or make the ship invisible to the mine. John Alexander Cato returned from the Great War a decorated soldier. With his brother, he established an orchard just north of Rheola in central Victoria and called it Zonnebeck, after the Western Front region where so many nightmare battles took place. In the museum's collection is this Australian Mark I landmine detector from World War II. A World War II detector, an engineer, a paediatrician and a World War I soldier are all connected. In the Dunolly Museum's collection is an Australian Mark I landmine detector from World War II. Take note of the round coil and long stem. As for the long stem, how close do you want to be when you find something suspicious? The wheeled cart is not part of the detector, but is part of the story. This image from the Australian War Memorial partially shows the Mark I detector to the left, with its circular coil clearly distinguishing it from the Mark II. The battery pack in its canvas pouch shows the socket hole for the power lead. This picture was part of a display of military inventions held at the Army Inventions Directorate, Spring Street, Melbourne, November 13, 1945. This image has a caption that advises the detector is new and Russian. It appears to be identical in appearance to the Australian detector, and there are problems with the image. The stem is one piece, and other components seem too large to pack into the boxes shown, which seem to be devoid of all markings. The control box is clearly shown, but the battery pack is not shown, nor is it worn correctly, as will be shown later. Was there some deliberate information misdirection that still exists? The Mark I seems very rare, as considerable searching has found only these two images. The separate technical video shows everything is marked in English. It uses Australian-made parts, with numerous examples of the Defence Department double D and broad arrow symbol, on this coil for example. We asked at the Australian War Memorial about this detector. Jane Peake, Curator, Military Heraldry and Technology, found some information for us. Chapter 27 of the Science and Industry volume of the Australian Official History of the Second World War is about inventions. Page 649 tells us about Mr. A. Miller, who in 1941, while watching a film, thought that people poking about for mines with a bayonet was not a good idea. He decided he could do better. The chaos of war breaking out meant that there were substantial patent application delays, and nothing much happened until mid-1942, when Mr. Miller was given a budget of £181 to develop the detector. It would appear the detector went into service late 1942. Interestingly, the battery for the detector is dated 14 December 1942. We suspect the battery was custom made for this detector. As yet, we have not found anything else re Mr. Miller. Bit of a mystery man, but he must have had considerable skills in electronics. Check the video notes for any updates about Mr. Miller. The National Archives of Australia hold hard copy files about the detector's development, but we haven't explored those as yet. Franklin Barnes was a mining engineer, and as said, he came up with the means to remove the threat of Nazi magnetic mines. without even seeing one. Knowledgeable and clever was our Mr. Franklin Barnes. I like to think his curiosity drew him to the invention display. Since he was involved with mining and electronics, did seeing the detector result in an interesting idea? Some might have said a laughable idea. With the benefit of hindsight, the possibilities are obvious. Kate Campbell was also a member of the Syndicate with a remarkable professional career. In 1922 she gained a Bachelor of Medicine and Bachelor of Surgery, Doctor of Medicine in 1924. She became the resident medical officer at the Melbourne Children's Hospital, then the Royal Women's. In 1927 she started a general practice, and years later she became a consultant paediatrician. For some 40 years she was medical officer to the Association of Victorian Baby Health Centres, honorary paediatrician at Melbourne's Queen Victoria Hospital 1926-1965, then consultant from 1965, while also becoming an honorary paediatrician at Melbourne's Royal Women's Hospital. For nearly 40 years she lectured in neonatal paediatrics at the University of Melbourne. In 1951, and thanks to her remarkable powers of observation, she wrote a world-famous paper about the cause of blindness in premature babies. The remarkable list keeps going right into the 1970s. The Syndicate had two other members, a mystery man we only know of as Mr. Muldoon, and John Hobart, who owned a tailor's shop and was engaged at the time to Franklin Barnes's daughter, June. The detector was used on the Catto farm just north of Rheola in central Victoria. Rheola was known earlier as Berlin. Barnes probably used his mining knowledge to select Rheola as a suitable gold nugget area. The story of why choose Rheola might start with a man named John Greenwood. Greenwood travelled around Victoria during the gold rushes. He made casts of gold nuggets for the Melbourne Museum. Dunolly Museum has replica examples of his work. Greenwood wrote detailed reports about many nuggets. We're lucky he got his information from the miners, not the newspapers. There was a fiasco with the Dunolly nugget. You'll find that story in the Dunolly Museum website, the nugget that never was. Unfortunately, Greenwood's handwritten notes about the nuggets has many missing pages. He wrote the following about Rheola. The Berlin diggings were noted for very remarkable and ponderous masses, as well as the innumerable smaller pieces of gold unearthed in the several gullies comprising the field. Their number is simply legion and more. Now listen to this bit. To describe them all, I'm afraid you would have to remain seated for several hours. Imagine that, several hours to describe gold nuggets found at Rheola. In the early 20th century, Edward Dunn made a very lengthy list of nuggets found in Victoria. This is a sample list of nuggets found at Rheola, a very, very short list. A book could be written about the pioneering Catto family. John Catto was a World War I hero. He was at Gallipoli, then the Western Front. When he came home, he and his brother started a prize-winning orchard, growing apples at the family farm at Rheola. The Western Front must have left an impression, as the new venture was called Zonnebeck. Joyce Shivers, spelt C-H, a daughter of John Catto, said that in the 1940s her brother Graham Catto found a nugget in the adjacent creek about the size of a matchbox. Joyce's father had found a broken-off piece of a nugget after ploughing. That had him wondering how big the other piece somewhere out there would be. He never found it, but the location was near where the precious nugget was found in the old days, which had his attention since the precious was 1,621 ounces, or 50 kilograms. The museum does not have a model of that one. Historically, that whole area had been worked right down to bedrock, so his find was a fluke. The 1946 image shows Rheola down the bottom. The green circle is the entrance to the recreation ground where the Rheola Easter Carnival is held each year. Adjacent the entrance is a monument with several of the biggest nuggets listed. The red circle is the Catto home, and to the right the rows of the orchard can be seen, but this is only part of the 1,600 acres held at the time. The blue circle is the roadside Zonnebeck sign. How the syndicate came into contact with the Catos is lost, but the detector was used in 2 locations: the pig paddock on the hill to the rear of the Cato house, and further north where the precious nugget was found. The period is not precisely known, but will be in the second half of the 1940s. How the syndicate got the detector is another unknown. It may have been as simple as army surplus. Barnes had a technical problem. The specific battery for the detector was not available, evidenced by the building of the cart. The cart housed a 6-volt lead-acid car or truck battery, which drove a motor generator that produced the high voltage needed for the valve technology in use. Transistors did not appear until the early 1950s. The drum carries a cable to connect the detector to the cart, with the detector operator wandering around the countryside. It would have been interesting to know what the neighbours made of those strange wanderings. So, was it a success? Well, apparently they made a discovery, and when telling John Cato about a mysterious line of objects, it dawned on John what they in fact found was the water pipe between a windmill and dam. It seems they became discouraged. The detector was dumped in a shed at the Cato farm, where it gathered dust for over 30 years. Now here is one of those moments when history could have been different. They could not know what many were to learn from the late 1970s onwards, that detecting for gold requires patience and determination. Had they persisted, they would have discovered their detector was quite capable of finding large, shallow nuggets. About 30 years would go by before Peter Bridge in Western Australia sparked a new gold rush when he provided Garrett detectors to a select group of serious prospectors, but that's another story. That is the background of the first known attempt at metal detecting for gold. The detector is on display in the Dunolly Museum after being donated by Graham Cato in 1980. In 2020 it was made fully operational using a few tricks for power that wasn't available to the syndicate. In the description is a list for a separate technical video. What follows is the detector in operation.
Rightio, switch on, and we have our course adjustment. As we swing through, we can get it there and fine. And we'll just swing it against the tripod of the camera here. Well, an experiment with a small target there has failed, which was just a hole saw drill which shank just dropped into the ground. Go over here, and I've got a pipe plate buried here. No doubt about that, is there? Let's go back to our hole saw drill. Oh dear, that's not too encouraging, is it? Shush. Where'd I put it? Not too good, but you can, one side of the quiet zone is more sensitive than the other, so we'll just noise up a bit and we'll go the other way and fine control and off. There it is there. Well, if you were using it for real, you wouldn't want to get it wrong, would you? Hook it out of the ground. Show you what it is. Okay, let's go back to our pipe plate. Oh. It would appear that most old landmines are substantially metal and quite large, so this is not going to have the slightest problem finding it. Although when you see, shush, when you see how big it is, you'll be not surprised at all. Of course, if it was the real thing, we wouldn't be rooting it out of the ground like this, would we? Of course, some things aren't a problem. The old Hilux Toyota. Oh, what a feeling.